bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Vendes, also known as Ricky Branson. A great episode for you today. Today we have Zowe Smith. She's a whistleblower. She's also a author. Her book is called The COVID Code, My Life in the Thrill Kill Medical Cult. And we have an amazing conversation about the history of medicine, health, nutrition, and much more. But as always, I have to remind you guys, this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of the discussions and the conversations I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. You can like, review, post a show anywhere you like. And all that activity, the liking, the commenting, that helps the algorithms hopefully working in our favor. But if you're in the holiday spirit and you can financially support the show, there's tons of ways of doing so. You can send a one-time donation via Venmo. You can send a one-time donation via PayPal. You can support us monthly on Patreon, and it doesn't have to be a lot. If a small percentage of people who watch and listen to the Ripple Effect podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do this show full time. So that hopefully puts in perspective that a little bit of money that you probably won't even notice is gone. If everyone contribute just that, it would make a huge impact in my life and in this show in regards to it growing and being my main focus. Other ways of supporting the show is you can check out our merch store. We have an amazing merch store. It's run by Big Frog Merch, which is a small family business. So getting some cool Ripple Effect podcast merch, 36 merch, Union of the Unwanted merch, doesn't just help me out, but it also helps out a small family business. But just because it's a small family business doesn't mean the products aren't absolutely amazing. I have so many Ripple Effect podcast shirts and hoodies from Big Frog Merch in our merch store, and the print always looks amazing. The detail is amazing. The quality is amazing. You get it quickly. Everything's super reasonably priced. And Ryan, who's also the host of the Independent Review podcast, does an amazing job helping me with new logos and designs and making sure we have the coolest looking merch and also the highest quality merch out there in the podcast world. Last but not least, Theory 6 Music. I have a brand new song called The Digital Disease. Digital Disease is really blowing up. People really like it. I sent it to just about everyone that I know, and I've gotten nothing but super positive feedback. I also sent the song to many podcasters that I'm sure you guys know and have been on the show in the past. And like I said, nothing but positive feedback. People really enjoy it. Obviously, by the title, Digital Disease, you can kind of assume that I wrote a song about transhumanism, man versus machine, and those type of concepts and ideas. And I really wanted this sound and the feel of the song to kind of reflect and represent those ideas. And I'm so happy how it came out and how it mixed rock and metal with drum and bass, trap, trance, and all these other types of electronic music that I enjoy. This song is available on all the streaming platforms, Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, etc. So stream it, check it out. If you enjoy it, then maybe go check out some Theory 6 merch. And also keep a lookout because I'm already working on my next song. And I believe that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Zowe Smith, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace. Hey, what's up? How are you?
Good.
Thanks for being with me. It's funny. I was just listening to your episode with Charlie Robinson, and I was thinking, I'm like, I gotta get Zoe and Jessica Rose on an episode together. I feel like that'd be a fun conversation.
Oh, that would be awesome. I'd love to talk to her. That'd be great.
Yeah, because she's always really cool with doing little duets, I guess you can call them, just having other guests on and kind of doing a little roundtable fun hangout discussion, and I think you guys probably have a lot in common, so I think you guys would definitely get along quite well.
I think so too. I saw a lot of like her articles on nanoparticles and methylene blue, and I did a special on methylene blue. And Ryan from Last American Vagabond still wants me to write a special for like another like part two special on that. So that's like in the works. So that would be cool. Talk to her about lots of stuff.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because obviously InfoWars has kind of made it a popular product and people are talking about it. And he gives it, I think Alex gives it to everybody who comes on the show and says, "Hey, like, give me your honest opinion on what you feel or sense or whatever." That's one of those rabbit holes I haven't really got gone down yet, but I'm always super curious about new different ways of supplementing things and just trying to be as healthy as possible, especially now, in my 40s. I've always been pretty disciplined, but like as I get older, you got to be a little bit more disciplined and really think much more about supplementing and eating right and hydrating correctly and whatnot.
Yeah. And the more you learn about health, the more you learn you don't know. You have to go back to the drawing board and yeah, it's a whole that the health thing is a whole rabbit hole. I was looking at Gershon clinic stuff yesterday, which is apparently like their clinic was illegal in America and
You're talking
was
about
pretty
Max's work, Max Gershon? Ger
no, it's the Gershon clinic, and I guess there's only like three. There's supposed to be only like three in the world or something. It was illegal in America. It was like some doctor who came up with this cancer curing protocol, and it's all nutrition based. He just like, and you're supposed to go. I guess the setup was you went and you checked into the clinic, and for like 3 months, they would make all your food, and you could be cured of lots of things: cancer, diabetes, all kinds of stuff. Now they ship it to your house. They don't. They shut down their clinic and they ship it to your house. So I was listening to that and like it challenged everything I think I know about health. It was crazy listening to that doctor talk.
Yeah, I wonder if it's related because there was a doctor called Dr. Max Gershon from I believe he's from Germany maybe or Austria, somewhere Eastern Europe, and he came to America and really you know was pushing the boundaries for his time about killing diseases and fighting diseases, with alternative treatments. So I'm curious if there's any link to that, if that's kind of his ongoing work, after he passed away, and maybe he started a clinic. I'm gonna have to look into that because that
It
seems.
might be. It sounds like the same. Apparently, he was a prodigy in like molecular biology and used that as a way to treat people. And it turned out that he could cure cancer and like came up with a protocol.
Well, it's funny because I'm sure you saw the strike we got on the last Union of the Unwanted, the last live one on YouTube. I believe the strike was due to us talking about cancer cures, and it's fun. It's funny because well, it is kind of hilarious how they pick and choose like when to be strict on certain things and when not to. Because when they gave me my channel back, like all my COVID stuff's back up, and also all my cancer stuff's back up. I've had Dr. Thomas Seyfried on, who wrote the book Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. He studies kind of how the ketogenic diet and many other dietary methods, fasting and whatnot, can help with cancer, killing cancer cells, or just helping your ability to recover from it or whatnot. And I've had Dr. Brzezinski on back in the day, uh,
Mm.
who was curing cancer. And there's some great documentaries on him. Eric Mercola, I think is his last name. He's a filmmaker. He's been on with Dr. Brzezinski a few times in the past, and his documentaries are phenomenal. He's another kind of like he's Polish, another Polish, Eastern European genius until he, came up with a treatment. It was related to anti-neoplastones, and he was treating people with that and having success with like very little to no side effects, but the FDA wouldn't approve it. And so it was considered like experimental treatment because it wasn't technically approved. So he was getting all these people who were terminally ill who had the option to go to a experimental treatment, and he was curing them. And you can see the documentary is phenomenal because it's like it's not third party, or it's not like, hey, he said this, or it's like you can see them in court. You can see people testifying, sharing their stories. It's pretty wild. And then not doctor, Italian filmmaker Massimo, I don't know how to say his last name, but he did Cancer Cures, which is really good. He was really well known for his 9/11 documentary, the one called 9/11 A New Pearl Harbor. He did that, but he also did a phenomenal documentary on cancer cures, and he goes through the whole history of basically all these experimental doctors that were getting crucified for going against the mainstream narrative and having alternative treatments and whatnot. And then that was basically one of the best documentaries on the topic. But and then the Y Files, which is kind of a kind of mainstream, very popular YouTube channel, they end up coming out with one called, I think it was called Suppressed. One was called It was like a double, a back-to-back episode, like kind of double part. One was like Suppressed Technology, which was anti-gravity type stuff, and then there was another one. I think it might have been Suppressed Cures, or no, Forbidden Cures. That's what it was. It was Forbidden Cures, and
Mm.
and that was really good too. And weirdly enough, that's still on YouTube. I think he gets really clever with kind of talking about it like, oh, this is kind of what we heard. This is kind of like a story, a folk tale. And he kind of like tiptoes the line of like, hey, kind of giving people a little bit of info so that they can kind of go down the rabbit hole themselves, but without kind of like pushing it so much, or saying that he believes in it, or he's recommending these treatments, so that way it doesn't become medical misinformation, which is hilarious because like everything that we were getting in trouble for medical misinformation during COVID is now all like typical general just approved opinions of even the mainstream
But
media.
it is crazy. I woke up this morning and Fox News, my mom had it on. They were talking about new Clade X, this new deadly flu that's going to be a pandemic, and of course it's Bloomberg School of Public Health that's saying this. So like, sounds like a rerun of COVID to me. But yeah, and everything that I have put out, every interview that I've done that has been talking about COVID, because I'm a whistleblower talking. I was in a hospital during the COVID pandemic. That's really what woke me up and like made me a conspiracy theorist. I like how James Corbett calls it conspiracy realist. I like to call it spoiler alertist. um, but and they don't tell you exactly what it is. They tell you here's the community guidelines, and go through the policy. And I noticed there's even a class now. It said you could take a class and get your strike removed if you take their class on wrong think, which is just completely asinine that they would do that.
Yeah, and the class is literally just a little questionnaire because I think I did it. I can't remember when I did it. I was kind of curious what it was. I'm like, what type of class is this? So I like clicked on it, and I remember it might have been a Union of Rwanda episode. I clicked on it and I started just to kind of see what would pop up, and it was like, ask me if I agree that like what was said in the podcast was incorrect and misinformation. Like they just want me to like basically admit that they were right and I was wrong. And which is funny because they don't admit that they were wrong and we were right. So it's like,
No.
well, but it's wild. But to
So
me, it's
yeah,
just,
I don't know if it's the COVID information because I've been censored for that for a very long time. But then I went on the Corbett report and I was really more talking about like the tracking systems that are built into healthcare and how they've used that in Gaza, like the same program from Operation Warp Speed they used in Gaza to track people and of course to execute people there. That didn't get censored. That's still up. So you can say that, but you can't say anything about curing cancer or COVID, apparently. But now some things about COVID are okay because I'm noticing like some of my interviews that were pulled from Spotify, even they'll go out and they don't get a strike. So it's getting it's getting more complicated to figure out which things are going to get censored versus less complicated. I feel like it was getting better for a while and now the trend is like amping up. And the fact that I saw that on the news today talking about like another pandemic sort of tells me, oh, we're kind of over the mark again because this is a narrative they're trying to run at the current time.
yeah, well, that's what makes it really hard to care about what's being censored. Like you almost have to do what you enjoy doing and put out what you think is truthful and just hope that, you can get it out there. Because if you try to beat around the bush to try to keep YouTube happy or keep some other platform happy, they just keep changing the guidelines and or making them very vague. So if they want to get rid of you, they'll find a reason to get rid of you anyways. And so it's not really, it's not for me, it's not really worth caring about that. It's like, okay, well, luckily the RSS feeds and like Podomatic, which I use for my host website, they do amazing job. And like anytime I've had issues, I know I remember during COVID when I had Mickey Willis on, when I had Del Bigtree on during COVID. Prior to COVID, I don't remember any censorship with Del, but like during COVID, that show wouldn't pop up on like iTunes and whatnot. And Podomatic would like help out with like contacting them, trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, they gave them some like technical nonsense about why people couldn't find the episode or why it wasn't on their feeds. But they didn't care what I was putting out, and they were willing to support me no matter what. So it seems like the RSS feeds like definitely one of the places where they haven't really infiltrated it yet, or maybe they can't, because if you can get the RSS feed right from a podcast, or you can bypass any middleman, iTunes or Spotify. If you use like Podcast Addict, you can get like the content directly from the content creator. And then Matt Raymer has been helpful with just kind of spreading my videos, because I'll upload the Odyssey, and then magically the videos will appear on Rumble and Band.video and all these spots. So I just try to do my best to do what like James Corbett does and like keep it open source, tell people to post it, get the conversations out there. But during COVID, I had Aaron Murray, who was the New York hospital whistleblower. I had Brooke Jackson. I had Robert Malone, Dr. Robert Malone. I had Pierre Corey. I had uh, Dr. Peter McCullough. And I was having all these guests like back to back. And then I just kept getting hit with like strikes and strikes. And I knew it was coming. I'm like, it's going to come. And then one day I woke up, and at the time I still do use YouTube TV, but I wake up in the morning, I put on YouTube TV, and it said my account didn't exist. I'm like, shit, they got me. So, and then I go to my Gmail account that was related to that YouTube TV and I was using for my YouTube channel. I had no access to anything. Like that Gmail account just disappeared, and all my content, just like everything just disappeared. Like nothing related to that. It's like it never happened. And then years later, which was I believe a year ago now, I get an email from YouTube, and they're saying, "Hey, if we're giving you one last chance to protest, the removal of your YouTube channel. If you want to give it a try, you can." And I'm like, "Oh, what do I got to lose?" So I'm like, I gave them an explanation why I thought, that they were incorrect with banning me on YouTube. And then like an hour later, it was back. And then it wasn't just back; it was back with, I think, like 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers. It had all my content, like all my COVID stuff that got me banned in the first place. And I'm like going through my content. I'm like, why is this all here? Like this is the stuff that got me banned. And so it was just really weird. And
That's
I think,
crazy.
yeah, at the time, I'm like, oh, it's because of Trump. Like Trump had a lot of issues with suppressing him, right? He was banned on Twitter, he was banned on this and that, whatever, so they're probably afraid from a business aspect that like, hey, we're like this.
Yeah, I was actually, so I've been fighting being debanked because I set up my book sales a little bit different than other authors do. So I'm running into even more censorship than they did. I'm trying to cut Bezos and Amazon out, and because I knew they were going to censor me. There was even a court case which RFK Jr. got rolled up in, and it was Biden versus RFK Jr. Basically, it ended up being like multiple states and other doctors, and then RFK was the only one who was able to go to the Supreme Court. And there was an Amazon files in there that was part of the case where Amazon, like Jeff Bezos, was specifically told censor any books about COVID, and RFK Jr.'s book was about that. So he was one of the people saying, "Hey, I've been censored. CHD has been censored," and basically the court said he had no standing to hear that case. So they're totally fine to shadow ban people, to dysregulate it when you try and put it in the search. So I was like, well, why would I even try and use that platform if they've admitted that it's totally fine to do that to my business? So I need an alternative platform. So I started selling books myself on my website. So I got like a credit card processor on there, and I was taking Give Send Go the night that I launched. The next morning, I had an email from Give Send Go saying, "You're a dangerous business. You can't use our platform." And I went round and round with them for like 6 months trying to appeal it. And Give Send Go swears it wasn't them, it was Stripe. And Substack uses Stripe, and I get paid from Substack. So that's really weird that they'll still pay me as a dangerous business on that platform, but they won't on Give Send Go. So apparently you can't donate to me. I can write for money, but you can't donate to me. That makes me a dangerous business. And then my website got hacked and taken down. I mean, it's been like attacked nonstop with bots. So it's like multiple layers of censorship there. And then I finally get my website back up after months and months, and I get a credit card processor connected. It was Square Pay that time. And I go on Grand Theft World, and I tell everyone this is where to go get the book. You can go get it on my website. It's the only place you can get it. So it's kind of like a funnel. Since it's the only place you can get it, they know they can get me by shutting me down there. And Square Pay apparently does censor people for their content. And so the next morning after that show, I had 6 sales that were all tied up. They said, "We're not going to pay you until April 2026. You're under investigation." They gave me no chance to appeal. They gave me a 6-page policy and said, "Here, read the policy. This is what makes you a dangerous business." I have no idea what it was. Probably the COVID content, but health misinformation. I don't know. They never actually come out and tell you. They just give you a policy and like make you figure it out. And so I had to like refund all of those books and tell people, "Sorry, I can't ship. I'm going to have to find a different money changer service." And I'm still in the process of like getting my website back up and going. So like it's been a nonstop censorship process on every level, on like the browser search level, on the virus. Like I've been censored by Norton antivirus, like verifiably, and multiple other platforms. Banks aren't able, like if I try and set up like a banking account for my business as an author, they can't get to my website. They say like it's blocked as a dangerous website. And some of that was security stuff. But even after I got that cleared up, they were still getting those warnings. So I still have people who can't get to my website just because it says medical cult in there. It has the word kill in there, and that makes it dangerous.
That's crazy. It's amazing how dangerous you are.
I know. I'm like, I wrote a book. Like, what's the danger? Maybe you'll get a paper cut. You might learn something. I mean,
Yeah, it's wild because it's like all these people who get banned, you end up talking to them and you're just like, yeah, they're just people who have opinions or a story or a journey or research they want to share with the world, and they should have every right to do so. And that's why I'm a huge fan of like, listen, I don't care how big of a shithead you might think somebody is, like let them speak. Don't censor any speech, and let people decide for themselves what is what makes sense, what doesn't. I mean, I'm constantly attracted to people that are censored. Like, when I remember the first time I heard about Nick Fuentes, oh, he's this horrible guy. And then I'm like, oh, they're censoring him everywhere. I'm like, okay, like I didn't care about Nick Fuentes at all until I heard that he's censored everywhere. Now it made him more intriguing. Same thing with Alexander Dugan or whoever it may be that's like, being censored. I'm like, once I hear that, any elite or any system is trying to suppress somebody, I'm like, okay, now I'm more intrigued. Like now so I think sometimes it does backfire. I mean, obviously it happened with Fuentes, it happened with Andrew Tate, it happened with quite a few people. It doesn't always happen, right? I mean, if you get lucky and you have a huge platform and you take off, like, yeah, you can push back a little bit. But for many of us, us, you, myself, many others that have been suppressed, it's like we don't have the resources to really push back. But I would definitely talk to Matt Raymer from Content Safe. He can help with your website. He kind of specializes in that. I'll connect you guys and and let him let him help you, because he runs my website and he specializes with this type of stuff. He's a IT genius, and he's also a huge fan of podcasts. He's been on my show. He's been on You've Unwanted. He went through the University of Reason with Richard Grove, and he's friends with Richard Grove, who actually was the first person to connect us, and hopefully he can help, and I'm sure, well, I'm sure he can. He can, maybe have him run your website because he specializes in that type of stuff. But yeah, that sucks. Before we get too all over the place, I do want to, and I want to come back to where we are, but for people listening who don't know about your story, your origin story, where you grew up, your line of work, your whistleblowing story, and then we'll slowly lead back to where we're pausing it for a second, and then we can expand from and go wherever the conversation takes us. But yeah, let people know a little bit about your origin story.
Sure. So I guess it's kind of hard to hide, and I hate that I have to admit it now because of Portlandia being in the news and all the bad press that they've got. It was cool before it started getting bad press in around 2016 or so. So I grew up in Portland. I always wanted to be a zoologist, actually. So I started out working with animals and learned that it really doesn't pay. It's really competitive. And I actually moved down to Arizona for a zookeeper job, and then it didn't work out, and I went back into healthcare. So all during college, I was working at a vet clinic, and then I started working at OHSU, a hospital lab. So I have hospital lab experience. That's what I was doing while I was going to school for science, which I got a BS degree. I like to say it's a degree in BS because it's a Bachelor of Science. And now I realize like almost everything I was taught is pure propaganda. But there was one class in college where it was very much like The Last American Vagabond. Like we all sat around and we read scientific papers. And that was actually the class where I learned about Monsanto. Like if there was anything that made me a conspiracy theorist before 2020, it was Monsanto and learning about glyphosate and Roundup, brand name Roundup, and the GMOs and how, what that was doing to human health and how Monsanto fudged all the numbers. So like this class was like what taught me how to debunk scientific papers actually. And I kind of used that skill all throughout my adult life. When I stopped working for a zoo, I went into like back into healthcare because that was like the most experience that I had. And I started working in a lab again. And then I learned about medical coding, and I learned you can work from home, you can set your own schedule. And basically all that is looking at medical records, and then you assign a diagnosis code or a procedure code, and it gets sent off to insurance. So like very boring. I describe it as like the librarian of the hospital. You're kind of in the background and you're dealing with the money and looking at the records. And it was really like for statistical reporting, like that's where they get their cancer numbers from. That's where they find out how many cases of heart disease there are across the world. And I didn't know this until during the COVID pandemic, that the code set is owned by the WHO and controlled by the WHO. And that was the system that I used. So I was very versed in like kind of that language, I guess, that code language. So it was really boring collecting all that information and really just like monitoring disease patterns. That was kind of your job. Just as you're doing your job, you see way more cases than like a doctor or a nurse would. So you really get a good feel for statistics. And I was in that field for 10 years. And then COVID comes out and they tell us initially that you have to commit fraud, that the coding rules don't apply here because the CARES Act, you can't get the CARES Act money unless you commit fraud, basically. So this was Blue Cross Blue Shield and Medicare, like specifically telling us to commit fraud. So even before 2 weeks to flatten the curve was called, I'm already thinking this is BS. This has got to be a scam. And up until that point, I knew that there was incentives for hospitals to make everybody get flu shots because I already had an experience with a flu shot where I got the worst flu ever. Everybody in my lab did. And all of us pretty much said, we're not getting the flu shot again. And so I exempted myself every year, and come to find out through coding that the hospital won't be able to bill to Medicare unless they get like 80% of their staff vaccinated for flu, and only 20% can file an exemption. And they have to file that exemption every year with Medicare, or they lose their ability to bill to Medicare. So that's millions and millions of dollars. And on top of that, they actually get like health scores. So they get bonuses on top of bonuses for the more they vaccinate, for the more they comply with that program. So when COVID came around, I instantly thought this is a vaccination program to make all the healthcare workers get your flu shot, because every year we kind of went through that. But then 2 weeks to flatten the curve comes around, and they're already telling us to do fraud for the CARES Act. And I thought, this is not the same as all the other ones. They're definitely like doubling down on this for some reason, and I couldn't figure it out until April 1st. They came out with a new code for COVID, so we weren't committing fraud anymore. They basically made the fraud legal. And then they started coming out with this experimental drug, remdesivir, that we were using, and they started putting people on ventilators, and they started running this PCR test on everybody. On the PCR test, they said, remember the contact tracing and how like even the phone apps, like if you got near to someone, you would get like a notification on your phone saying you've been around someone with COVID, now you got to go get your PCR test. Well, I was kind of watching the PCR test thing unfold. And right then I knew like this is a major, major like HIPAA infraction, like privacy breach, because we had registries in coding up until then. Like there's an HIV registry, there's cancer registries, there's device registries for like if you get a pacemaker. And that's where they get the statistical information of how many complications they have. So like if you go and you ask your doctor, if I get this pacemaker, will I have a problem with it? That's where they get their information from. And I knew with this PCR test, like they never did this PCR test before on people who didn't have symptoms, the whole testing the asymptomatic people. Now they're testing everybody. And the point of those registries before was to take, like they literally had people whose entire job it was to take that personal information out before they sent it to the database. For COVID, they were telling us in coding, like we had a peer review journal and it said in there, this contact tracing, we're actually bringing like volunteers in at the very beginning of the pandemic to collect all this information, who you've been around, what's their email address, what's their contact information, what's their phone number, where do they live, how much money do they make, what's their ethnicity, and all that information that used to be removed is now getting sent and collected to it in a database. And I was like, whoa, red flag, this is bad, people. And I just knew like all of the data information that was being collected on that through the registry. And so I started wondering, why are we doing this registry? And then I found out that it was PCR testing was being layered with that. And the reason why we had all these false positive PCR tests, like when I worked in the lab, there was no such thing as a false positive. If there was a false positive, that meant the test didn't work. That meant their quality controls did not work. Their reagent wasn't right. Their machine wasn't calibrated. It meant that the result means nothing, whether it's positive or negative. If you have a false, either one, false positive or a false negative, it means that the test did not work. And whatever you think the test means, you're actually not getting meaningful information. And it had nothing to do with the psychothreshold. So I knew like there's something that they're doing to manipulate this test, and they want all this information from everybody. Why do they want all this information? And why are they running it on everybody when they never did that before? Come to find out, the CDC made sure that everyone who was running this PCR test, and I learned later it was a PCR test, and PCR tests were always done for genetic sequencing back in my lab days. They weren't used for virus identification. And if you ask Harry Mullis, the inventor, if you ask David Rasnick, who I've interviewed, they both say it cannot detect a virus. But what it can do really well is sequence your DNA. And then, so that was like a big eye opener for me. I knew that the PCR testing was actually collecting people's DNA and personal information. And I didn't know for what purpose.
I don't want to derail you, but I just had a quick question about the PCR test. So when they were doing the higher cycles, right, and everybody was saying that was contributing to finding trace amounts of viruses that weren't having any effect on humans, what do they mean by that?
When they're finding trace amounts of virus by the test?
Or basically how, like, because even Dr. Fauci publicly admitted that the higher cycle threshold was leading to false positives and false negatives or whatnot. How is that happening if it's not looking for a virus?
Well, So PCR can't find a virus, but they have to have a template. It's basically like, think of it as a copier machine. So you have to have a template to make the copy first. So you have to feed it some sort of template. So a PCR test has that, and then you have to add in basically like the ink and the paper, and then you have to put it in the machine. And then what comes out is a whole bunch of copies of whatever you're making. Well, if you turn the contrast up too high, then you get a piece of paper that's all black and you can't tell what the original image looked like. If you have it too low, it comes out all white and you can't tell what the original image looked like. That's basically your cycle threshold, is turning the contrast up or down. But if that template is fraud to begin with, if what you're making copies of is a lie to begin with, then it doesn't matter how many copies you make, still a lie. And that's basically what the PCR test was. They never isolated SARS-CoV-2 from a patient. They never determined that it was contagious. What they did was they took BAL fluid, which is lung fluid, from a patient who had pneumonia in Wuhan. And within a few days, they basically like put it through this lab process where they cut up all the proteins, put it in a computer, sent it through, some computer analysis where they found lots of other strains and compared it to this strain, like genetic strains, genetic sequences. We're looking at DNA. And they're like, okay, well, based on this, the computer called it a consensus sequence. So after analyzing all these different, with other people that weren't sick and this person that was sick. So really there's no significance to that person. They don't even know that that person really had SARS-CoV-2. They just had a pneumonia, and it wasn't like different than any other pneumonia. They just like said, we think you have SARS-CoV-2. So they got this sample. They do that with a lot of pneumonia patients, but they try and grow out a bacteria or like in a culture usually. They don't necessarily do PCR tests for pneumonia patients to try and isolate what it is. They usually think that it's a bacteria, and they try and focus the antibiotics to that bacteria based on the culture result. It's usually what they do. So this was weird that they did it that way to begin with. But then the computer basically found an average of these certain percent of people have this sequence, and we're going to call this the SARS-CoV-2. Just like when David Martin is talking about, they can basically take like one part of the DNA and say, this is the variant, and then they can just take the next section of DNA and say, this is the new variant. That's basically what they did, but they set their template in the PCR that they call the SARS-CoV-2, the spike protein. They say, actually the spike protein is different, but the SARS-CoV-2 virus, they say that it was a consensus. So they knew that they would find that sequence in a certain subset of people. And that's how they got their pre-existing positive result. And then they can dial it up or down with the cycle threshold. So they set it up to where they would probably, by statistically speaking, they were going to find a positive result in a subset of the population based on their analysis of how they created the template. And then they use the cycle threshold. That's where Anthony Fauci goes on to say that, because PCR testing, the way they do it, the tech can just like use a little dial on their machine and dial up the cycle threshold. Well, eyeballing it is not science. For anybody out there who hasn't studied science, eyeballing it is not science. And that's basically how they do the PCR test. And I watched the machines. I looked at like the machines that have come out and what they do and like how the people set them up for the hospital, like Thermo Fisher machines. And they actually have videos on telling the techs, oh, well, if you want to turn the cycle threshold up, make it look like this, then you change this right here. So they actually told people in their instruction videos, set it for 40 to 45 cycle threshold. So they ensured on top of the template that they're going to get positive results in a high number of people.
That makes sense. That's a good explanation too, because I haven't heard it explained in that detail. So thank you for that. And sorry, I'm gonna ask some dumb questions because I'm an idiot. So I'm gonna sit from time to time.
No.
I might ask for a clarification because you do get into the weeds of stuff, which is good because a lot of times words get used and we repeat things and not really quite understand exactly what we're saying. So that I'm glad you're going into such detail. Now, as the story advances, uh, I mean, at some point, were you concerned about being outspoken in like your career? And I mean, were you just ready to like give up on the whole, modern medicine philosophy? Or could you
Well,
see?
in my book, I have a chapter called Red Pilled, and so we were talking about natural health at the beginning. I had a long, 10 years long battle with a chronic pain condition called endometriosis, and I had multiple surgeries for it. I was looking at having a surgery probably every couple of years for the rest of my life. All my vacation time was going to be recovering from surgery, and I was in so much pain, even my neighbors could see that I was in pain just trying to walk my dogs. Like, I wasn't even walking right. I couldn't concentrate. It was taking over my life. It was interrupting my relationships. It was awful. And so I figured out that the treatment was worse than the disease in my case, and I healed myself. So when COVID came around, I was kind of just doing, like, going through the motions of being in healthcare, because I realized that Western medicine, all they really do is they offer drugs or they offer surgery, but it doesn't actually heal. And I realized that there's like a profit motive to keep people sick and to keep giving them drugs. And I realized we don't cure heart disease, we don't cure diabetes, we just put them on drugs for life. So I kind of already saw that, and I had, been a victim myself. And then I learned through alternative health, like, I healed myself through changing my diet. I went paleo and I started eating like unprocessed, no sugar, no carbs kind of food. And my pain went away and my hormone issues resolved. And, my health entirely changed because of that. So when COVID came around, I was already like doubting Western medicine to begin with. Um, so that was kind of like the base level. And I had the like financial impact and how Medicare controls the health system knowledge just from being in my job. But then every day I'm watching people die of the protocols, and the doctors deny that the protocols were killing people. And it was my job to falsely label it as COVID so that they would get their bonus money for the vents and the remdesivir and just the running the PCR test and labeling a COVID test. They would get a bonus just for that. So like I could see that that was happening. And I thought that was really like my crisis of conscious moment. Like, I was crying myself to sleep every night. And I was like, I literally, they are murdering people in there every single day. And there's nothing I can do about it, because when I come in, that person's already dead. I can't go and, get these people out of the hospital. I can't go and talk to their doctors or go and talk to their family. I was reading the police reports about the family that were trying to come in and break these people out of the hospital, and the police were throwing them out and arresting them. They were calling, hospital security was being called, and I could read all these reports. So like, I really didn't want to be a part of it anymore, because I could see, what my part in it was, and I didn't want to help them do it anymore. So, and then that was like toward the end of 2020, and Operation Warp Speed was just about wrapping up. They were announcing the vaccine was coming out. And of course, we're healthcare workers. I was a healthcare worker, so I'm like front line, and I'm supposed to get this thing. And I knew there was going to be mandates coming down. I knew they were going to use the flu policy to make people get the COVID shot. So like, I could already see that the doors to my career were closing. Because if I proceeded, I would have to take the PCR test. And I knew that they were collecting people's DNA. I didn't know for what purpose. Now I do, but I didn't want anything to do with that. And if I got an exemption, then I would have to take the PCR test. So they really didn't leave me any avenue to stay in. And my job after the vaccine came out was to falsely label all the vaccine injuries as something else, as a heart attack, as a seizure, as a blood clot, whatever it was. So I just knew, like, they're using everybody in this field. And if everybody in my field had actually stood up and walked out like I did at that time, because I walked out right before the mandates came down, and they said you have to get a COVID test by, I think it was in my state, it was by the end of August. You had to have it or they would fire you. And some people are still trying to get back pay and vacation pay, and hospitals are trying to bring them back. Some of them, if they need them bad enough, are getting the vaccination waived and they're getting exemptions. But it didn't look like that was going to happen for me. And even if I did, my job was to falsely label the vaccine injuries when my job should have been to collect that safety information, which I could see already in the first 4 months of the COVID vaccine coming out, just from my 10 years of statistical background knowledge. I could tell that the COVID vaccine was more dangerous than all the other vaccines combined, and that people were dying from this, like almost instantly dying from this, like within hours dying of the shot. And so I thought, I can't keep doing this. They've made it impossible for me to keep doing this, and I won't be able to live with myself if I keep working for them. And to this day, I have not gone back. I got a phone call like last week, and they asked if I wanted to come back and be a coder. And I said, okay, here's my conditions. I'm not going to take a PCR test. You're going to have to exempt me from all the vaccines. And I'm not certified anymore because I would have had to pay $200 a year plus get 32 continuing education credits, which I would have had to pay for out of pocket when I'm not even working in order to keep my credentials. So my credentials lapsed, and I said, you're going to have to pay for it. And I never heard back from them. So that's how it's working out.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised I didn't call back, but
I
uh,
know.
the, I had so years ago I had another medical coder on, and I can't remember who connected us, but she worked at a big hospital, and she was seeing some really ridiculous stuff with like paperwork, like people they were being really lazy with like specific codes and specific paperwork, and she was seeing people die or people get really sick because they half-assed like specific details that are really important. And I was curious, and I can't remember which episode that was. I'll have to look it up, but it was she didn't want to lose her job. She still did it, but she wanted to say something. So she came on, and we hid her identity, and she came on. She didn't say who she was, and first of all, is that you? Because I can't remember if I
No,
even
it
did. I'm
wasn't
kidding.
me.
I'm kidding. I
This was
think you
my
did.
first time on here.
I think off air she did tell me who she was. Whoever connected us, but I know she was like petrified of like losing her job because she's basically admitting that medical malpractice is like causing and stupid stuff. She's like things that could have been avoided because it's
Oh,
like
yeah,
they just mess up on a code. They did whatever. She went into the details, but I was going to ask you, like, you see that type of stuff?
totally. Yeah. When I worked in the lab, actually, I wasn't even a coder yet, working for a university hospital. And my mom actually worked there in the lab as well, different section. But we would notice that there would be like trauma teams. And most of the doctors and nurses in ICU, they work 12-hour shifts. So there's like a team and a B team, not like one's better than the other, but one works one shift and the other works another shift. And us working in the lab, we'd have to review the orders. And generally on a patient, you can tell like they're going to do a certain kind of lab like every day, like a CBC and a chemistry panel almost every day, just to, like get a baseline. And then they might do some other specialized testing, and that's usually it, unless they're trying to diagnose something, and it's not going to be routine. And we could see all the orders for any individual patient when we go to enter them, and we would notice that trauma team A would order the same stuff as trauma team B. Like they didn't even look at those records. And I remember my mom making a comment to me one time saying, and she hates tattoos, she said, I should tattoo it on my back. Do not take me to that hospital. If I'm ever in an emergency, I don't want to go there, because we would notice that a mistake would be made in the ordering of one test from trauma team A, and then trauma team B would come on, and they would do it all wrong. And based on that one mistake, everybody that touches it from that point forward, every department, they screw it up because they see the wrong information, they take the wrong information forward to the next step, and everything's so siloed in medicine. Is what people don't really understand is you don't understand what the next person is doing after, like, my mom even took a class in the hospital and they described it as like building widgets. Well, it's basically an assembly line. Well, you're in an isolated room building your part of the widget, and then the assembly line goes off to the next room. You don't see what they're doing in the next room. So you don't have an idea that you just made a mistake and the next person is going to make a similar mistake because of something that happened early on. And it doesn't really get caught until something like medical coding comes around, after the whole patient, they've They've gone through the whole everything they're going to do in the hospital. They've been discharged. That's when someone starts looking at the records. And that's when they're like, hey, wait, this doesn't add up.
Well, the other thing people don't realize is that they kind of just make up their numbers for all these steps. They're charging your insurance, and the price, the value of each step is just made up.
Yeah, well, especially on the outpatient side, like inpatient is all bundled and it's all paid on a DRG. That's what like the ventilators and remdesivir that was all paid under inpatient. But for outpatient, yeah, it's a fee for service. And the whole like Western medicine paradigm, your doctor, and they teach us this in medical coding that your doctor is supposed to do an exam. They're supposed to write out their they call it like a rule out process. So they have to have a differential, medical differential, and this will be like all the diseases that they think that your symptoms could be. And then they have to do diagnostics, so different kinds of tests to rule out every single one of those diseases that they put on the differential. And that's why every time you go in, you see a doctor and you say, hey, I have a cough, they're like, okay, well, if they basically have it's like a math equation. Well, if cough, then this, then I have to do this kind of exam. I have to do this many different tests and then, write out these are the different options and then cross them out based on the tests. And that's why you'll be asked to do a test that you like if you know you have an allergy or something and they're trying to rule something out, they will order a test that they know you probably don't, you're not going to come up positive for, but they have to run the test in order to rule that disease out. And it's a money making thing, especially on the outpatient side. We would see that in medical coding too, like especially the cancer screenings, the mammograms, the colonoscopies. Those are money makers. The well child visits, those are money makers.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I'm like, why am I showing up to tell you that I'm okay and I'm fine? It's like it's absurd. And the thing is like they're all systems, and once a system's built and people are profiting from the system, you can't change the system. You can't, and there's little incentive to change the system. It's no different than like I remember back in the day hearing politicians talk about how they would have to vote for like, Pentagon funding or whatever because they're like my district builds tanks, or so I have to be pro-war. I have to be, because we have this economy, we've built this economy that we now have to keep alive and we have to keep this machine alive. And the medical system's no different. And you see it in everything, like, the dental world, like, I'm for the longest time they tell your little kid, your toddler, hey, do you want to do a fluoride mouthwash, or you want to do, it's like, why? And have you researched fluoride, or are you just trying to sell me a product? And same thing with going to see a eye doctor. Same thing, like. I see it in my personal life with my parents and people close to me. They immediately get them glasses. Your eyes and glasses to me a lot of it's like it's kind of like having training wheels, right? You get used to having these training wheels, and then you can't take them off. You like become dependent on them, and
Mm-hmm.
and your balance weakens because you've been using these training wheels. Same thing with your eyes. Like you get used to using these eyes, you get dependent on them, and then you need a stronger prescription, then a stronger prescription, and it's like they never tell you like, hey, if it's not that bad, maybe work on not being on a screen as often, go outside, look far distances. I always say like your eyes are no different than the rest of your body. Like your muscles or whatever. Like I need to work out my muscles, and if I only do really light weight high reps, my body adapts to really lightweight high reps. If I only do really heavyweight low reps, then my body adapts to really heavyweight low reps. Well, your eyes are no different. There was I remember the Memphis Five, that whole story. There was it was like the five kids they were kind of like gothic skater kids, and they got accused of like a murder, and then they got locked up, and then like Pearl Jam and a bunch of people protesting were outspoken, and then come to find out like they were kind of accused of it because they were kind of the outsiders in the little town they were from. But anyways, long story short, the one of them gets out of prison eventually, and then when he gets out of prison, he's telling this story about being in prison and how he was in isolation, and he was in this small little cell, And he talked about when he got out of prison, he lost his ability to see far because everything he looked at was really close. The cell was really tight. Everything, his food, he couldn't even have forks or knives or anything. He'd have to eat with his hand. He like lost his ability, to eat with forks and knives and whatnot. So like, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. Like, it's no different than why when you imagine, a bookworm or a nerd or whatever, why do they all wear glasses? Because if you're staring at a book really close to you, or if you're staring at a computer researching or reading or doing schoolwork or whatever, then your eyes get used to only seeing things close, and then you don't work out those muscles to see things far. So I guess, my point is that I believe there's more options than just immediately going to glasses. Obviously, there's like vitamins and things and foods you can eat that have a ability to help out a little bit. But I think, and it's funny because I've been talking to my wife about this because my son's vision is like he's starting to squint a little bit, and she's like, oh, maybe we should go get him glasses. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm like, let me get him some vitamins. I'm like, let's limit his TV time or tablet time a little bit. And yeah, and really he's not on a lot because he plays a lot of sports. So every day he's playing basketball or soccer or whatever. So he's outside a lot. That I think has been super beneficial. But a lot of times these long trips, he's on the tablet. He's bored in the back seat and he wants to be, so it could be an hour of just staring at something, and
Yeah.
I'll yell at him and be like, hey, put that thing down and look outside. Try to read a sign that's far away, and
Yeah.
but my point is like the dental world, the eye doctors, like they're all trying to sell you products. And do you, I mean, have you seen that where like every aspect of human health has been just basically a money making machine?
Yeah, totally, totally. And I completely agree with you about the eyes. Like, and I think the reason why I'm having eye problems isn't necessarily age. I think it's that I've spent the last 2 to 3 years staring at a screen, doing a bunch of research, trying to write my book, trying to edit my book. And I have noticed there's a lot of eye strain going on. So I have been trying to do kind of what you're doing, like use my eye muscles better and like, improve my nutrition. Because I refuse to believe that the human condition is to just deteriorate. I keep learning, like from Marjorie Wildcraft, like if you have the right minerals in your diet, you don't go gray. So I think there's a lot more to help that Western medicine just won't tell us, and it's because of their paradigm. I mean, you've got public health involved, you've got the AMA involved, you've got insurance involved. All of these, there's money behind them, and you're right, it's a system, and this is why I say like going back, like before the Flexner report, when the AMA kind of took over medicine and Rockefeller took over medicine and made it to where it's all this Western medicine, like drug based, surgery based system. And they really did orchestrate and create that system. No doctors can really operate outside of it effectively. Like they really shut it down. We need to get back to having an alternative, because when you're right, when you go to your doctor and you hear about anything, diabetes, heart disease, your dentist, your eye doctor, they're never going to tell you about the long-term things you can do to fix your health. They're just going to give you the quick fix band-aid approach. Oh, I have a pill for that. Oh, I have a surgery for that. Oh, I have glasses for that. I have a root canal for that, whatever it happens to be. And I find it's so vile right now. Like the fluoride trial has come out. We realize, like, the NTP has publicly admitted that fluoride is a neurotoxin, and I still see commercials on TV with regular dentists talking about how fluoride is now antibacterial somehow, and it'll help keep you from getting cavities when that's been proven to be not true. It's still allowed to say that on TV. That kind of medical misinformation is totally fine. But whatever kind of medical misinformation we said on Union of the Unwanted, we don't even know what that is. That's somehow not fine, because it it challenges their profit motive, really.
Yeah, years ago, and I've told this story quite a few times, so listeners, bear with me. But I had Jim Abrams on. He was the filmmaker who did the Naked Gun movies, Airplane, and he actually passed away, I think, a year or two ago. And R.I.P. Jim Abrams. Still one of my favorite movies are those Naked Gun movies, and and the original ones, they obviously could not recreate a classic like that. They tried, but they couldn't. And so he has a create. Do you know his story and the Charlie Foundation story?
Mm-mm.
So he had a son, was born having this issue where he would have like these violent seizures, like hundreds of them a day. And he went, this was like the height of his film career. He had access to all the best doctors, could travel all over the world to try to figure out this issue. He put strain on his family, on himself, all this stuff, because everybody, 24/7 had to watch out for Charlie because he could have this violent seizure at any time. And one day, so he had surgery, he was on prescription drugs for years and years and years. One day he's doing his own research, and in the hospital or in the library he finds out that John Hopkins Hospital, they had some success with the ketogenic diet and curing kids of these seizures. I think it was like in the 80s. But they stopped doing it because then they started researching prescription drugs as a solution. So of course the common theme with all these stories. So he ends up going to his doctor and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this? And like, is it worth giving it a try?" And the doctor goes, "Oh yeah, putting a kid on the ketogenic diet sounds too difficult." And he's like, "Dude, my kid has like violent seizures every day for years. We've had surgery that did nothing. That was probably unnecessary. He's been on prescription drugs that will probably have some negative effect on him at long term." He's like, "This is worth a try." And so he did it, cured his son of the seizures. Years later, his son Charlie actually thought maybe it wasn't like his diet, so he started eating carbs and not eating very clean anymore, and his seizures came back. So it
Mm-hmm.
showed that it was well, at least well, maybe the issue wasn't dietary, but it was a dietary solution that could help. And and then he started the Charlie Foundation that would look into dietary solutions for these issues. And then there was a movie he did actually on the story called Speak No Evil, I think it's called, with Meryl Streep. And so it's, yeah, fascinating story. But this is like and the reason I always tell the story is because it's a perfect example of how a very famous wealthy guy who had a lot of resources went to every doctor, and they kept telling him that the only solutions that exist are the ones I'm telling you. And
Yeah.
over again, they would tell you, like, these are your only solutions. You got to try the. And then there's this alternate solution that actually worked that nobody told him about. So,
Same thing. This dog right here gave him a rabies shot in 2020. He had violent pneumonia, like would not eat, was losing weight. I didn't know what was wrong. I took him to the ER. They didn't know what was wrong. They gave him some drugs, made him worse. I brought him back to a different vet, and they said, "Oh, he's got like bronchitis. If he were a human, he'd be hospitalized." And I kept him at home, and I didn't know what to do, but I started taking him off the meds because the meds were just making him worse. They thought he had pneumonia, so they gave him antibiotics. And about 3 months later, I'm working, doing my medical coding job, and he has a grand mal seizure, flipping over on himself underneath my desk. And I quit immediately working, and I took him to the vet. And of course, first thing they want to do is put him on drugs. They want to put him on phenobarb, which is, it would make him like a zombie pretty much. And, I had worked in a vet clinic before, and I knew lots of animals with seizures, and I knew that that was the protocol. But it also makes them really tired and kind of dopey because it just depresses their immune system. And that's everyone that I've known that's had a dog be on that drug. They say that their dog is not their dog when they're on that drug, is how doped up they are. And so I told the vet right then and there, first of all, do a valley fever test because I think that's what it is. And she didn't want to do that because it was expensive. But I lived in Arizona where it's really common, and I had friends of mine who got it, and I said this happened in the summer, right after a dust storm, which is when the fungus that causes valley fever would have come up. And he's a dog, so he's breathing it right off the ground. He's more likely to get it than I am. Do the test. So she did the test and it came up positive. Well, one of the manifestations of that is actually it can go to the nervous system. So I don't know if his immune system got knocked down because of the rabies shot, or if it was like a latent effect of the rabies shot, but this all happened within like a very short period of time right after the rabies shot. So, and I got him updated on all his other ones at the same time. But I've looked at the insert for rabies, and seizures is the number one side effect you can have from that. So, one of the two, maybe one added led to the other, but I decided I'm going to treat him naturally. And so, what I did was I put him on oil of oregano, essential oil, which gets rid of fungus. Um, and I had him on that for like a year. And then I started adding in CBD, and we use frankincense essential oil to put on the skin. And I changed his diet, and he hardly ever has seizures anymore. If he does, he gets like one where like he'll kind of be zapped out for a second and then he'll kind of come back out of it. He doesn't have like the violent grand mal seizures anymore. And I've helped other people heal their dogs that were having like many hours long seizures where like their like leg would be moving for hours on end, and they wouldn't quite be with it because they kind of lose consciousness when they're in a seizure and they don't know where they are. um, so yeah, you and diet is huge. Like that's the first thing that I tell people when you have an animal that has seizures. What are you feeding them? And I notice with my dog, if he eats something that's slightly rotten, or like, he goes outside, he gets like a mouse that's been sitting out too long or anything like that, he will break into seizures again. And it's very much tied to the diet.
Yeah, it's funny. Animals are not that different than humans in regards to like the advice you should be giving them. Like, don't get vaccinated. Like, I treated my parents have animals, and I remember they asked me about vaccines. They're like, oh, like, should we get them vaccinated? I'm like, don't get any of your animals vaccinated. I'm like, on your farm, when you grew up in Portugal, I'm like, were you vaccinating your farm animals? No. So I'm like, why would you do it here just because the town tells you if you have a dog you should or whatnot? And I'm like, it's no different than, what they do with children and adults where they're just trying to, sell a product. And Mother Nature already has it all figured out. Like we're just keep trying to reinvent the wheel for profit. But I remember telling a buddy of mine about milk thistle for his liver, and he's like, oh, that's funny you say that. He's like, my dog had some health issues, and then the doctor said it was it was something to do with his liver, and then gave him like some liquid milk thistle to take. This and that. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, so your dog's doctor will give him some good advice. Your doctor will probably put you on a pill. But I'm like, yeah. I'm like, milk thistle is a natural herb that can help with your liver, and obviously everything goes through your liver. So if your liver feels good, typically you feel good. I mean, there's so much old wisdom that, people laugh about. And, I have a gut feeling. For the longest time, we would say that way before the gut trend, way before people started talking about gut health, we would say, I have a gut feeling, I have a gut feeling. It's like we knew there's something important about the gut, but we just didn't know why, and we neglected it. And so I think a lot of things that we're learning, we're actually relearning.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of knowledge that's been lost. One of the things that I would really like to see is not just like a lot more alternative health practitioners out there that people can see. Because one of the things that people forget about, or maybe don't know about, is that Rockefeller himself, while that whole family, they used holistic and natural herbal medicine while they were making everyone else use their oil-based drugs. So like they knew themselves that alternative health, well, like we call it alternative health now, but it's kind of like an inversion because herbal and natural health was the original. Rockefeller Health didn't even come in until after 1900 when they figured out that they can make drugs, and then they took over. So how did people survive up until then? Like I kind
So
of wonder that. And at that time they had all kinds of different schools where doctors could learn from other doctors, and they would actually be out like in the town going around talking to people, and they would get more hands-on experience rather than going to like a seminar like they go to now, where doctors are just, it's basically like a brag fest where like all the pharma cartel gets to come in and say, oh, here's your free hotel thing, here's your free buffet, here's your free pharma samples. Now here, go back and peddle our drugs for us.
yeah, I mean,
Oh.
People go back and they learn the history of it. They realize that what we call alternative medicine was the first medicine. It was what we considered medicine for the longest time. The root extracts, the teas, the oils, all these things. Like our food was our medicine. What's that famous quote, right? Or let food be thy medicine, or
Yeah,
like
let food be thy medicine. Wasn't that Da Vinci or somebody?
no,
Um,
I think it was the guy who oh my God, who's the famous doctor, right? The guy who kind of created um Hippocrates.
Hippocrates. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's a Hippocratic oath that
Yes,
doctors. Yeah, it
exactly.
was
Yeah.
Hippocrates,
Yep.
which is really hypocritic, isn't it?
Yes. It's
Hypocritical
wild.
of them.
But it's funny, like the foundation of what they're learning and where the origin story of their field comes from is like this understanding that, like, hey, food should be our medicine because we are all on this planet in harmony and things have existed this long working together. And now we're just poisoning ourselves. Like, now you're starting to see people talk about aluminum in cosmetic products and, fluoride, like we said, in like toothpaste and whatnot. But like for years and years and years and years, we've been poisoning ourselves with all these things. And then you have health issues. And like, I always tell people close to me, I'm like, your health issues didn't just start overnight. Like a lot of times it's like a small progression into being sick. It's like, hey, you're just buying some cheap deodorant that has all these chemicals. You're using some fluoride toothpaste, you're eating, foods that are full of preservatives. I'm like, and little by little, maybe in a short term, it doesn't have a effect on you, but long term, like you don't know what it could do to you. You ever hear that story about I think it was called popcorn lung? There was this guy.
I've heard the term popcorn lung, but
Yeah. Well, they found it, like what happened was that this guy every single night would have a bag of popcorn. And so every single night he'd throw popcorn in the microwave or however he would do it. And then he'd open the bag and he would smell it like he loved to smell popcorn. Apparently, one of the chemicals that preserved the popcorn, long term, again, this is like a perfect example of like short term, if I have a bag of popcorn, probably has zero effect on my health or very little effect on my health if I'm eating
yeah.
clean afterwards and whatnot. But if I do it every day for years, like this guy ends up having this weird lung thing, health issue that they end up naming popcorn lung because of how he got it. And it's like, but it just shows how like all these little things, all these poor life decisions, and it's really not.
Well, it's not even the life decisions. Like they put poison in everything. There's poison
Yeah.
in the air. There's poison, like there's seed oil in our foods. That's poison. There's GMOs. There's aluminum. There's all kinds of heavy metals. There's Roundup, glyphosate, PFAS, BPA, all kinds of like hormone dysregulating stuff in our food. And it's almost impossible to avoid at this point. And humans are miraculous in their ability to heal, but also miraculous in what we can take before we actually start to feel effects of the poisoning. Like I kind of think back to like medieval times. Like we've probably all seen movies where like the king had someone right next to him to taste all the food and drink the stuff so that they wouldn't be poisoned, because like they were so paranoid about being poisoned way back in the day. They actually had to have like kind of a sacrificial lamb with them to like test everything first and make sure it was okay for the king, right? And we even have like a rumor of, or an old wives' tale of don't poison the well, as in like everyone will be poisoned if the water is poisoned. And I mean, it just kind of like reminds me of like it. I think that is like their overarching approach to put poison in everything to where we can't avoid it. And then that leaves us in like a really weird state where, well, how do we get the poison out of ourselves when we keep poisoning ourselves just through eating? That's like another whole level of the alternative health rabbit hole. Is, oops, did my
Yeah, I
camera went
think
away? I didn't touch anything. That's
we're
the
being
gremlins.
we're being listened to. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, Poison the Well, great band. I don't know if you listened to them growing up, but they were a great kind of a post-hard or hardcore band back in the day. But yeah, you're right. People don't take that in consideration, and you're correct. Like I really should restate that it's not really just our poor life decisions. I know some people do know things are harmful and still do it anyways, but it's also almost a unfair fight because everything's poisoning us. They make it really difficult to find anything that's not harmful for you. You know, how do you avoid taking pills when like, hey, I'm sick, who do I go to? It's much easier just to go to the doctor and then take their advice, then do your own research and then not know what to do. So it's like everything's stacked against you. In Europe, you know, much of our foods are banned and you have to prove something to be safe before putting out in the public. Here it's like, you know, our FDA sucks. I mean, we put prescription drugs on the market, which when we put them on the market, they're supposed to be FDA certified to be safe. And then a couple months later, you see attorney commercials on TV saying, "Did your friend die of this drug? Call our law office." I'm like, wait, wasn't that thing just put on the market and it's already taken off the market and there's already lawsuits? It's like, what
Yeah.
type of FDA safety process are they actually going through?
Try it and see. We're gonna put it. I mean, I think I even heard somebody from that, like a whistleblower from the FDA, a video come out that said, like, we know that a lot of the drugs are unsafe, and like the whole point is we will put them out, and as we start to get complaints about different things that are happening, then we'll decide that it's unsafe and pull it later. I mean, even right now, CDC, Children's Health Defense, with Sasha Ladipova's advice, is petitioning HHS to go back to the PrEP Act and change the labeling on the vaccine, on the COVID vaccine. And now it's getting a black box label. When it was, how safe and effective was it before? 98, 99% effective, and then it went down to like less than 40% effective, and now it has a black box warning.
Well, you know what else was 99% effective? Doing nothing because you had a 99.9% chance of survival. So I'm like, it's just as effective as doing nothing. I'm like, your chance, and it's crazy. Yeah, I think back of that era, and I just remember driving around and just seeing, you know, playgrounds with not one life and not even homeless people. I don't even know where homeless people found, you know, a place to go. But apparently, when COVID came out, they found somewhere to hang out at because
Well, guess what? The homeless people weren't getting sick of COVID. When I was coding in the hospital, like people would come in for like exposure or even alcohol overdoses or drug overdoses that were homeless. And we would provide them like cabs and hotels sometimes because they like the hospital had like vouchers for stuff like that when they needed to discharge someone after treatment. And if they couldn't go home on their own or whatever, guess what? None of them, none of the homeless people got COVID during COVID. This is so weird. The unclean who had, didn't have sanitation or whatever, they weren't getting COVID. That's so weird.
maybe we're gonna find out that fentanyl kills COVID and kills you. But
Well, like right after, so this morning when I saw the little bit on Fox News about Super Clade X's new flu variant that they're saying is going to be the next pandemic, the immediate clip right after that was talking about vilifying cannabis because it's causing mental health issues in the country and blah, blah. And didn't we have all kinds of science coming out saying that cannabis actually made it so you don't get COVID? So I don't know if the two were connected, but it definitely seems like they think so.
yeah, they pick and choose when I mean we grew up in an era, I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure we probably both grew up in the era where weed was still demonized. And I didn't
Yeah.
smoke weed, but I didn't I'm like you know, alcohol was kind of my drug of choice and I liked having a drink and I'm like, hey, if I can go out to a bar and have a whiskey with a friend, then if some other guys want to go and have a smoke with a friend, then like who am I to judge them for picking a different drug of choice than mine? Like neither of them are, you know, are 100% healthy and neither of them, you know, they both can have some negative effects. I guess if you do it socially and you can restrain yourself and you have good discipline, like, yeah, you can do it from time to time. It doesn't affect your life in a negative way. And some people will say it affects your life in a positive way. So, you know, to me, it was so obvious that they were picking and choosing when to demonize something. It had nothing to do with it being healthy. I mean, during COVID, everything was shut down except liquor stores. You know, it's like, well, that, which probably was because they knew there'd be a real revolution if they took away our alcohol. Like that's where you would draw the line. You're like, hey, listen, I'll stay home and watch Netflix, but you got to let me get my whiskey or my alcohol, my whatever, my Bud Light.
Yeah.
So it is wild. And so and it just but it also amazes me how quickly people fall into the trap again. It's like, okay, over and over again, the government has proven that they don't care about your well-being and that they'll lie for other interests. And yet, this time you think they're being honest. This time you think they're being truthful. This time you're going to take their word for it. And it's wild. I keep thinking like, this every wave of like people getting red pilled, that it's like this is going to be the biggest wave. This is when like a lot of people are going to wake up, and then there's just some people that will go back to the same. And I actually heard you talking to Charlie about a podcast that I was also on, and Charlie was on, and we were all on, you were on, and Deborah gets red pilled, and we've talked about this in the past. And it's funny because when he did that podcast, I don't think he understands how unique and different it was, and how people would still be talking about it years later. But it really was unique, and it was a perfect. It was almost like a public uh, s- science experiment, right? You're trying to red pill somebody, a boomer who's been brainwashed her whole life, and you're trying to reverse the MK Ultra experiment that happened to her. And every time you think you got there, you listen to the next episode, you're like, damn, we're back to square one. Like, there's just, it's so hard to get through that programming. And for people listening, maybe you want to explain what you were asked to do on that show.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was this guy Adam and his mother-in-law Deborah came on the show, and yeah, she was a boomer and kind of more on, I think, like the liberal side, maybe like politically speaking. But super sweet lady, and she was a really good sport about it all. And the whole point was like um, to bring someone on to talk to her about something like COVID related, because she was of the mindset where she thought the vaccine was safe and effective, and believing the Fox News narrative or whatever. And I know I personally went on there and I did exactly what Charlie said. Like, I thought I got through to her, because at the end of telling her my experience, what made me a whistleblower, I had just quit my job at that time, and I was like trying to work on a farm and like step away from it. I hadn't even started writing the book yet. And at the end, she goes, "Oh, I'm shaking in my boots," because she got the vaccine, and I was talking about the turbo cancer and all the effects that I had, just seen in my medical coding career, and how bad that it was working out. And that was before we had the science. Now the science actually proves that that statement was true. And yeah, the very next episode, she was right back to believing the mainstream news narrative. And I think what Charlie said was true. Like, they get 22 hours with her, and you only get, two out of the day. And that's just one day. She's got a week, 24 hours each day up until the one that she does the podcast. And it's just not, I think what I keep coming back to is like, I have sympathy for people like that. Because I mean that's my parents' generation. So like I can relate to them. But I think what people are underestimating is how painful it is when you've been lied to on that level. Like, emotional pain is almost worse than physical pain. Like, I could get punched in the face tomorrow and I'm going to recover from it in a couple minutes. I might have a bruise, but whatever. It's no big deal. I can brush it off and go along. But when it's emotional pain, it's a lot harder to shake it off and just keep going. And there's really like, there's no like bruise that forms necessarily. Like, you have to like process through whatever that was and deal with it yourself, or not deal with it, and maybe it'll come back and haunt you later. But it emotional pain, like it's different than physical pain, and I think that's what people are actually experiencing that makes them like cling to their previous belief, and not like the whole that brings on the whole cognitive dissonance thing.
Well,
um
Richard Grove had a great documentary called State of Mind: The Psychology of Control, and it goes into how they've been working on how to manipulate us and how to persuade us and how to uh, tug at our desires and wants and needs and all these things and our fears and scaring us into believing things and whatnot. I mean, that was a lot of what happened with COVID. It was like, hey, we make people scared, they'll just take our word for it because they don't know what else to do. And that's kind of what happened. Just keep showing these numbers, keep showing Chinese people dying in the street, which never happened here. And everything was a illusion, a manipulation, and nobody's in jail because of it. Nobody's saying like, hey, somebody should be responsible for. I mean, we everybody in their personal lives has maybe
We
somebody.
should have a football team of people in jail, like not just Fauci and Gates, but like, I mean, this was a global crime. It was the biggest crime in human history. And you're right, no one has been prosecuted for it. I mean, Fauci stood trial, but I think that was like a cooling the mark um, exercise where they're just trying to like, they know that we're angry because we've figured out what they've done and they had to make it look like we're going to get some sort of justice. But then, he wriggles out and nothing ever comes of it. And it was just enough to like kind of let off the steam to where people are like, oh, something's going to happen. We're not going to be as angry anymore. And that's the only thing that we've gotten out of it is like threats of maybe we'll get justice. But the PrEP Act is still there. The system is still in place. The order followers are still working there. So like the trap is still set, guys. Nothing has changed. And until people go to jail and realize that there were there were murderers and people were like denied their last dying moments of being able to see their family, like you can't. I'm sorry, I will never forgive them for that. And until we get to a place where that can't happen again, then I'm not going to stop.
Yeah, I remember saying it for a long time after, things kind of it wasn't the top news of the day anymore. I remember just constantly telling people, I'm like, I know we all have COVID fatigue. We did years and years of talking about this topic, but if we just move on from it, if we treat it like any other trauma in life, like, hey, let's just hide it in the back of our subconscious and never revisit it again, then nobody's ever responsible. And, my kids were homeschooled. Luckily, we gave them a normal enough environment where I think it had very little effect on them. But I even then, like I'm kind of speculating because I don't know when they're adults, like, if they're gonna have some trauma that comes to the surface. And I'm like, shit, that was because of COVID. That was, so and that happens. But there's a lot of kids that without a doubt, I don't have to speculate, will have some trauma due to their parents being freaked out. Their parents saying, don't touch this, don't touch that. Wear a mask, don't put it on your chin, don't, this and that. So it's
Yeah.
you got to get vaccinated. I mean, how many healthy people are dying and getting sick? We lost DMX, we lost we lost so many important historic figures. And but in all seriousness, like people like him, like who were, they seemed healthy. Like there's all these celebrities and athletes that seemed somewhat healthy, and then all of a sudden, like there was just this uproar of like every other day on Twitter. It's like this guy died and that guy died, and I'm like, and all like people we knew, people that were famous, people who were r- relatively
Yeah.
old, right? And
Well, and it's still going on. I think Mark Crispin Miller, he writes on Substack, and every single day he's got another article coming out with here's the musicians that canceled their show, here's these other famous people who died suddenly, here's the new turbo cancer, celebrity with the most recent I mean, it's still ongoing. It was a genocide, and it's still continuing to this day. It's been quiet and it's been kind of drowned out by all the other psyops going on and the war in Israel too. I say that's been the loud genocide, and then the COVID one's happening all around us, but it's silent. Because it's happening behind closed doors. I mean, even during in the hospital, I mean, they were killing people and they were sending them to the morgue. They weren't dying on the streets, and it's still kind of happening.
And it's so frustrating because it's like I know so many people that, and I'm not one to fight online, but I had too much time during COVID and too much build up anger on what was going on because, people like you and I knew exactly what was going on. And the fact that people were just spreading and sharing what was real medical misinformation, like we needed this vaccine to get back to normal. That, it was so I mean, I just would get upset and I'm like, I can't not say something because and then I'm letting this bullshit spread. So I have to say something. And I would get in these, arguments with like friends of mine, family members. I ruined a couple holidays. Not and really not on purpose. I really was trying to find civil ways of discussing this because I'm like, I want to share what I know. I was having Dr. Scott Jensen, I believe it was his name, the Minnesota a doctor and senator. And he was talking about auditing COVID. I'm telling people about him. I'm talking to them about Brooke Jackson, the Pfizer whistleblower, and all. And I'm like, and they're just like, yeah, but and I'm just like, dude, I'm like, I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to. help you from making and the other thing too, like my kids aren't vaccinated. So it's like I'm like, hey, they also told me that my kids would be dead. If I didn't vaccinate them at birth immediately. And they're the healthiest kids in their school. And cognitively, they're great. Physically, they play multiple sports, some of the best athletes in their grade and in their age range. Um, I'm like, they're alive and well. I'm like, so obviously they lie. But it was just, it was so frustrating. And even now, like the fact that people will, I'm too nice and I don't like conflict. So, but every once in a while, like you'll run into those people that you're fighting with online and you're civil and you're like, I kind of just want to bring it up. I just kind of want to be like, hey, you ready to apologize? You ready? Because I kind of, I'm like, I'm like, and maybe you don't have to apologize. Maybe it's not about, but it's more like, hey, can we just admit now that like, you're tricked. I mean, you were brainwashed. You were, like they got you. I'm like, it's not your fault. They were lying to you every single day on every single news station, on every single radio show, on every famous person, every person you respect was lying to you, telling you needed to do this, and if you didn't, this was going to happen. But I'm like, it just, I feel like sometimes I would like if one or two people in my personal life like said, you know what, Rick, you're kind of right about that. My bad. Like I gave you a hard time. I called you a conspiracy theorist. I called you this. I called you that. And but I guess I'm okay with being a little ahead of the curve. That's why I give like Candace Owens a lot of credit and some of the people who like are kind of ballsy on topics that aren't very popular because I'm like, she's just willing. I'm like, agree with her or not, if something's really not popular and she believes it, she's going to say it anyways. And she's not going to let public opinion stray her opinion in one direction or another, which I love because I mean, that's something we've all done. And that's why, sometimes we have been what looks like on the wrong side of history. We're like, hey, you're questioning 9/11. You what a piece of crap. You think our government could have done this tragedy? And now, years later, people are like, yeah, something fishy about that. It's like, yeah, for the longest time, I was getting in fights with people that I wasn't even trying to like. I had people that were I remember being one time at a restaurant and talking to somebody about it, and some veteran like lost his shit because he's like, are you saying? And I'm like, dude, I know where your passion's coming from. You went overseas, and I'm telling you went overseas based on a lie. So the thing that motivated you, the thing that inspired you to sign up, like, to think that you went to go defend a government that was responsible for that thing or could be responsible for hiding it or covering it up. Like, yeah, that's really hard to deal with, So like I would understand their frustration, and I think sometimes it takes some time for people to be able to get emotionally detached from a story, to look at it more logically and less emotionally. And I think 9/11, you saw that. Obviously, everybody can talk about the JFK assassination without any emotional attachment to JFK. So it is one of those things where I think COVID, hopefully, and we're getting there, where like people are far enough from it where they can be like, okay, yeah, maybe we were lied to. Maybe they did, But in a way, I'm like, I kind of do want people to be still a little emotional because I want them to be emotionally angry, and if you're angry, maybe we can, force some type of, consequences for their actions.
Yeah, I would like to see them continue to be angry. I think they're trying to make us be angry about other things. But and it would be really nice. I don't really expect it to happen because it's kind of one of the hardest things for someone to admit when they were wrong. And even if they do admit it to themselves, it's even harder to like actually come out and say it. It takes a big person to do that. And some people have actually come out, at least online, and said, I was wrong. I believed them. And now I'm on the other side of it. And you guys were right. Thank you for trying to warn us. And I have had like some Substack subscribers write to me and say things along those lines. And honestly, like that really warms my heart because, well, I feel like I'm in an echo chamber and I'm speaking to people who are all unvaccinated who think like me. Like that's not true. And we do reach, people with different mindsets, different worldviews all the time, and I, like you, I'm trying to find like how do we build bridges? How do we reach people who might not think exactly the same as us? How do we get out of our echo chamber and like learn how to, be a part of a community with these people? Because I've heard the argument that the people who got the vax, they deserve it, blah, 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 but they were lied to. They were deceived. And even if to this day they believe the lie and they think that, we're weirdo conspiracy theorists because we were able to look at information that they weren't willing to look at, it doesn't make the information that we received any less true. It just means that they're not willing to look at it. But the way I look at it is those people were lied to, they were manipulated, they were deceived, and that's not okay to do right there. But they were manipulated and deceived to their death, basically. Like literally, the system murdered our friends, our family, and that's not okay. Like there needs to be consequences for that. Um, but I highly doubt that we're ever going to get to a point where all those people who were deceived are going to actually come out of it and say they were sorry. At least now it's starting to become more of like a common topic to where like people don't get super triggered to where they're like yelling and screaming. And I know I've had like I've ruined family relationships too, trying to, get to the truth. And I trigger them to the point where like they just push back and push you away. So I've learned to try and like soften so that I can try and find whatever that common ground still is. As I think there's even a danger of like isolating yourself to just the conspiracy theorists when you go too far, not even, I don't want to say too far because I love information, knowledge is power. But when you get so focused on that to where you can't have a normal conversation with other people, then you can't reach those people anymore. So I'm really trying to focus on like, how do we build bridges and reach those people? And I'm also trying to focus on the ones that are more open to it than others because I kind of feel like if you guys aren't on board by now, there's only so much I can say, so much time I can try to plant the seed before I'm just going to focus on the people who are actually open to it. And that's kind of my approach with the book, the COVID code. Like it's a really triggering cover. I've had people like pick up this cover and put it down because it's got the jabs on it and it says cult on it. And that's triggering for people. But I did that intentionally because I know that this information can be really disturbing and it's going to take someone that's somewhat open-minded to it to even be able to absorb any of the information. So I kind of did that cover intentionally to kind of be a filter. Because if you see that cover and you're not super triggered, like you're already open to the information. That is the audience that I went for. But I do think it's becoming more and more common as more people start to get put two and two together about what's happening since the jabs. Like I just saw a video from a nurse in the UK talking about how deaths are up more than ever before. More people have, flu and long COVID, the adverse effects from the COVID vaccine, various assortment of them. And that's kind of becoming a pandemic in and of itself. I kind of wonder if that's how they're able to frame this new subclade flu they're talking about, is that it's actually, vaccine injuries and they're just reclassifying it, which is a game that they play a lot over time, reclassify symptoms into something that they can use to their own ends. So I think eventually we will get there, but it probably is going to take a little bit more time, unfortunately, because there's still too many people that are so triggered by even just bringing up that vaccines might not work. Like I still get in arguments online about, well, you're killing grandma and all the kids ever if you don't get the MMR shot or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's like that quote, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. And yeah, it's really difficult to snap people out of it. I mean, it's like SIDS. I remember when, I had my first child and, there was this conversation about SIDS. I'm like, what the fuck, SIDS? And they're like, oh, sudden infant death. I'm like, yeah, but what causes it? They're like, oh, they don't know. I'm like, this sounds like a fucking cover up if I ever heard one. I'm like, so you're telling me you just made up this medical term that sounds like you have like explanation for something you actually don't have an explanation for. And I remember like right off the bat, I'm like, dude, this is no different than vaccines. I'm like, this is bullshit. I'm like, and I right away, I'm like, the ability for people to, and this is one thing I give Candace a lot of credit for. She always talks about like, don't believe, your lying eyes. And it's like, I say this all the time. If something doesn't seem to make sense to you, just because somebody that you think is supposed to be smarter than you is telling you it does make sense, don't just take their word for it. There's a very good chance it just doesn't make sense, and they're trying to convince you it does. And so yeah, without a doubt. And I think in the medical world, you do have to do your own research and really look hard at incentives and who's profiting, and really go back to our roots. Live more like our ancestors. But as we wind down, I do want to talk. I know you showed your book a little bit. I do want to talk about, where can people get your book, if they want to follow you, your Substack, all that type of stuff. What's the best places to keep up with you?
Well, I am working on my website right now, so it probably won't be ready by Christmas. It might be up by then. If not, definitely by the new year. So I'm working on that. It's thrillkillmedicalcult.com. So by the time you watch this, it might be up. So you can keep checking there. It'll say under construction until it's actually up, maybe a week or so. You can follow me on Substack. All my research articles, all my podcasts are there. It's zowe.substack.com. That's probably my biggest platform. You can comment. Comments are free. Everything is free except for the book. I do have, for $5 a month, if you actually are a paid subscriber, you can get the book. And it's kind of a mixed media. It's one chapter at a time. It's got the official audio in it. It's got infographics and videos and stuff that you can't get in the print book. To get the print book, you can actually go to eBay and put in the COVID code or Thrill Kill Medical Cult, and it will come up. So I have that on eBay. And my newest product, since I do have an audiobook that was just out since summer, so this is pretty new that I have the audiobook out, I decided I needed to have a physical media. So this is a USB drive that you can order, and I do take cash through the mail. And I'm going to be putting up the order form on my Substack and on my Twitter. Also, I have a Rumble channel. So go to Thrill Kill Medical Cult /Zowe, the one with Zoe. I have two channels, and the one with Zoe is all of my stuff. So I actually had a podcast for about 6 months called Escaping the Cult. So you can see all the interviews that I did there. And I repost interviews like this there too. So if you go to the repost, you'll see a lot of my other interviews on other podcasts. But this you can also get on eBay. This is the USB drive. It has the ebook, the audiobook, which is narrated by me. I spent most of my summer recording it. And so this is a physical media that you can order. And if you go to eBay, just put in the COVID code and it should come up there. And when I get my website up, then you can order it from the website. I'm hoping to get it up on Amazon too, because Amazon doesn't make those. And so I'll just kind of be using it as like a shipping platform. So you could check there in the near future.
Awesome. Yeah. If there's any links that you specifically want to make sure I put it in the show description, please send them to me, and I'll make sure that the listeners can get them. If they're listening or watching to the podcast, the links will be in the show description. And thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again in the near future. Chat and maybe get you on another Union of the Unwanted. See if you can help us get that second strike. And take care. I'll send you the show once it's up and live. And if you need, if you want to talk to Matt for website stuff, or just to share your videos on different video platforms or anything like that, let me know. I love connecting people. Even though we burned some bridges during COVID, most of my life I try to, like yourself, I try to build bridges. So if I can help in with anything in any way I can, I definitely will.
That would be awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. Fun conversation. And let's do this again in the near future.
Yeah, definitely happy to come back.
Awesome. Take care.
All right. Take care.